Hi there, and welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, John Ivison. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by the Federal Innovation, Science and Industry Minister, Francois-Philippe Champagne. Sir, nice to see you. It's nice to see you in Canada. I know you're just back from South Korea and Japan, and straight after this, you're heading off to Europe to go to Germany.
Indeed, in 2 hours. So here we go.
Two portfolios ago, you were the International Trade Minister. It seems that you're still the International Trade Minister, no?
Well, listen, my job is to make sure that we bring industry back in Canada, and I think in that we've been pretty successful. I mean, if you look, we gave ourselves a mission to build the battery ecosystem. Well, first of all, when I started, we wanted to rebuild our vaccine capability to ensure the health and safety of Canadians, and I think in that, I'd say largely mission accomplished. You know, when I took over that portfolio, and you make me feel old now because I had four before. So at the time, you know, when I was Foreign Affairs Minister, we said, despite the spending of the G7 countries on vaccines and PPE, we were all scrambling to be able to serve our domestic population. So one of the first mission was say, we didn't choose the pandemic. We don't know what may happen next, but let's choose to be better prepared. And now I'm proud to say we've achieved that. We have now, when I started, we had 30 million doses in fill and finish. Now we're close to 600. And the next thing was the aerospace. And the third one was really the battery ecosystem. And to your point, yeah, I came from Germany. I came from Japan and South Korea, and I'm on my way to Germany today. And this is really to make the case for Canada. And if you look over the last few months, honestly, I think we're punching above our weight. You know, even Bloomberg mentioned Canada ranking second in the world, very close behind China and ahead of the United States. And I think our vision is paying dividends. So yes, exciting. You know, you and I started chatting even before the full recording. I say, listen, not only I'm going in Germany, but I think for the first time, and Canadians should be pretty proud, we've been invited to present to the top 400 manager of Volkswagen at their board meeting, and later on in the week to Mercedes-Benz. You know, I'm pretty excited because I know this is going to be paying dividend. Just a few months ago, John, people would be laughing at me when I was saying we will re-engage with the German manufacturers. And just a few months after, we're invited to the board. So not a bad journey in terms of what's coming next.
So in terms of dividends, what's your hope, if not your expectation, from Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz?
Well, you know me, I'm always aiming for the top. So both my hopes and expectation is that, listen, when I started, we did not even know each other. When the German chancellor came, we signed memorandum of understanding with both Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz. Now they're inviting me to their board meeting to really understand what Canada has to offer. And I think it's revolving around five things. You know, Canada stands out in the world, which is fraught with challenges, supply chain issues, logistics issues, a lot of stability and predictability. And that is obviously very important for these car makers. But the other things is really five things. You know, I think they realize Canada is a magnet for talent. We still attract some of the best talent around the world. We have very strong ecosystems when it comes to the automotive sector. We have the critical minerals, and I would say their proximity is everything. Proximity to resources, market, assembly line. Renewable energy. Everyone is trying to decarbonize their supply chain. And lastly, I would say access to market. You know me, John, I never present Canada as a country of 38 million people, but rather a country that gives you access to about 1.5 billion consumers. So we've been blessed with a Pacific coast and Atlantic coast. As much as when I was in Japan and South Korea, met with the CEO of Hyundai, for example, I said, listen, you're different, we are different, we'd like to welcome you back. This was well received, and now bringing the same message to Europe. And what I expect, I think that in the coming months, John, I think as Canadians, we'll have something to celebrate. My hope and my objective is to bring back the German auto sector to invest in Canada, and I think we're going to get there.
Are they looking to build manufacturing plants in North America?
Well, I cannot say everything now because you're not going to follow me during the day of the announcement, but I have to leave a bit of suspense. But I would say Germans being Germans, rarely they invite you to their board meetings only for chatting. I think this is really about building a long-term strategic partnership, and that plays to Canada's strength. You know, my point is, I always say I want to be the green supplier of choice to the automotive industry and other industries. We're going to be producing green steel, green aluminum. I'm after green batteries. I want to produce green microchips. We're going to be looking at recyclable plastics, everything that they're looking for in order to decarbonize the supply chain. And Canada has to offer what they need. So we really stand out, I think, as people are trying to realign their supply chain closer to their values and principle. I think this is playing very well for Canada.
Just turning to Asia, we've just seen the launch of the Indo-Pacific strategy. You were in South Korea and Japan. The strategy seems to be to, if not decouple from China, then at least diverge from China. But, you know, we do $20-odd billion worth of business with China. Nobody else comes close. I think Japan's somewhere around half of that. Do you expect the shortfall? We're already seeing the trade with China falling off. Do you expect the shortfall to be made up by countries like Japan and South Korea?
Well, for me, the Indo-Pacific strategy is three things: standing up for Canada in line with our value and principles, protecting our national security and national economic interests, and certainly diversifying our trade in the region with Japan and South Korea, both of which, we have a free trade agreement with. So what I see, and it's a trend that you're saying, it's not only me. I think you saw the British Prime Minister today. You saw recently the Finnish Prime Minister. I think that you're seeing global supply chain being realigned. It's true for critical supply chain. I think people are looking for more resiliency. And when you look at resiliency, I think Canada comes top, because what you're going to need for the economy of the future, whether it's electric vehicle or semiconductors, you need critical minerals. So I think when people have a choice to realign their supply chain, they'd rather go with a country like Canada, which has the same values and principle enshrined in democracy. And I think this is playing very well. So yes, obviously, there will still be trade with China. But I think when it comes to critical supply chain, the type of things that can really make you succeed or hurt you in the economy of the 21st century, I think about vaccines, I think about semiconductors, I think about critical minerals. I do see that realignment. And not only in Canada, but I said, the words of the British Prime Minister today were very much in line with what we've been doing in Canada. And I think it's a good thing, John. I think it's about time that we work closer together between allies and friends around the world. And the message I get when I go in Japan and South Korea is exactly that. We want to do more with Canada. When you go there, food security, energy security, supply chain resiliency is top of mind. And those are the type of things where Canada can play a big role to strengthen our position in the Indo-Pacific strategy. When you become the supplier of choice of food and energy, you become a critical partner.
No, I think it would be fair to say that your strategy has been successful in luring the battery ecosystem to Canada. That, as you mentioned, the Bloomberg study suggested Canada was number 2 after China when it comes to the whole spectrum of things combined. I think the total
in just a few months, John, if I may.
Right. Well, $15 billion and 10 announcements, right?
For Canada, it's what, 17 billion or thereabout since 2020 is what we get our mind to something. Our industrial strategy is paying off. We did that in biomanufacturing. We're doing that in the auto sector. And I'm trying to do the same thing on semiconductor.
So let's come to that in a minute. But you cut me off halfway through there. I wasn't praising the government. I was here to bury the government, not praise it. And that strategy has its critics. The Wall Street Journal called the international bidding war for EV projects to be the greatest corporate welfare program in history. And you've spent billions of dollars, if not tens of billions of dollars, luring these businesses to Canada. Is that money well spent?
Totally. I never win on the money because you know what, John? There are some folks who have far more money than we can put on the table. You don't need to look very far for that. If you just look at what's going on south of our border with the IRA and the CHIPS Act, I mean, you've seen our colleagues. I think this is a good thing. In a way, it's a catalyst for the adoption of EV vehicle. It's probably the largest investment we've seen in generations. But at the same time, it forces us, and as we said in the fall economic statement, to remain competitive because our supply chain are integrated. My message in Washington, I said to our American folks, it is in their national security and their national best interest that Canada remains competitive because underlying the CHIPS Act and the IRA is resiliency. And in order for the United States to be resilient when it comes to semiconductor or EV vehicle, they need Canada. So it's our time for us to innovate more together, to build more together, and to sell more together to the rest of the world. And I would say, John, what we're doing in Canada, I mean, I challenge anyone, compare what our friends are doing in Europe, compare what our friends in the United States are doing. You'd see that we're usually pretty cheap. We don't win on the money. We win on talent, we win on renewable energy, we win on the ecosystem, but we certainly don't win on the money.
If you didn't put the money up, would we lose then?
Well, I don't think that you could even consider that. I think governments have to be part of the equation, because what you want is to at least level the playing field. Otherwise, how can you compete? But at the same time, we need to be working with our allies and partners to make sure that this is not a race. We need to win on other things, I would say, than support from government. That's why we've been building, our competitive advantages is around, we've been blessed by geography, we've been a magnet for talent, we have renewable energy, we have access to critical mineral. Those are the type of things that I put forward in my discussion. And I must say, John, honestly, I wish you would be with me when I travel in Japan and Korea, or even in Germany this week. But, subsidies is not the first thing that comes in our discussion. Obviously, you need to be on the level playing field in a way, because, the United States with that has been, this is a not only a catalyst, but it's a great investment tools for them, what they've done. But, we need to work harder. That's, if you ask me why I don't sleep much these days, because this is a generational opportunity. And honestly, if you look at the return on investments, you take the LG Stellantis plant, both the manufacturing, the battery, you're talking about $10 billion. That's going to be thousands of jobs for decades to come, hundreds of millions of operation costs per year. Those are the type of things that, for me, we need to be judicious how we do that, but we need also to keep our relative proportion of the auto sector in Canada, because we want to preserve the sector, but we want to thrive in this new industry, and I think that's what we've been doing.
So you mentioned a level playing field in the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. We've sheltered under the umbrella of the IRA, which views North America as one market when it comes to critical minerals and electric vehicles. But it doesn't necessarily do that for other emerging technologies, from hydrogen to biofuels. Are we likely to be penalized unless we can get under the umbrella again?
Well, the U.S. is our largest trading partner, and what makes the difference, our colleagues around the world often look why Canada is treated special. And I say it's because of the integrated nature of our supply chain. If you look in the automotive sector, we often remind our friends down south that a car would move like 6 to 7 times the border before it gets to a final customer. Our supply chain are so integrated that we need to have policies which are aligned if we both want to remain competitive. And so that's the message I'm bringing in Washington. And I say, like I said, the IRA is a big catalyst for the adoption of EV vehicle. It requires us to work harder and to really bring forward. And honestly, John, when I say to colleagues who look at investment, I said, when you look at your return on investment, don't just look at the next 3 to 5 years or 10 years. Those are bets you're making for the next 30 years. Canada has an unparalleled education system, healthcare system, tax system, which is favorable, renewable energy. We have a lot to offer, and competitiveness is just not about subsidies. Competitiveness is a number of things that we can provide. And I think that resonates, because you said it, Bloomberg has recognized it, and we have landed a number of deals. You like Umicore, the only non-Chinese precursor to cathode materials, which has decided to come to Kingston. There'll be a piece of Kingston in every car in North America. That's the type of thing. We need to be smart. We need to be inserting ourselves in strategic supply chain. But what we're doing now, John, I would challenge anyone who said, why are you doing that? I'd say we're ensuring the prosperity and the success of our auto sector for generations to come. If we didn't do that, I would say you should be, of all, because you follow these things, you should be concerned that what does that say to the future of our auto sector? I think now we have saved it. We've renewed the mandates of all the automakers in Canada, and we have inserted ourselves in a strategic position that we become intricable in the supply chain of EV vehicle in North America. And I think that's a good place to be, honestly.
You mentioned semiconductors a couple of times. What do you see in that space?
That's my dream. Canada does not yet have a fab. We're one of the few countries. Well, we're the only one in the G7. This is big. This is challenging, but that's not the first time that we tackle things which are big and challenging. Now, what I think would be within Canada's ambit would be if we could manufacture semiconductors, the one that they call legacy semiconductors for the automotive sector. I think that what I've been saying to a number of manufacturers, this is the sweet spot for Canada, in my view, to make sure we have a resilient automotive sector in North America. I've been talking to a number of people. I said, why don't we replicate? We have a very strong corridor, which is the Detroit-Windsor corridor when it comes to automaking. Why don't we create one between New York and Quebec? We already have IBM, which is doing most of the packaging and testing of semiconductors in North America. If our friends down south are going to increase production, there's an opportunity for us to increase the packaging and testing so that we become more resilient. And that's a message, I would say, John, that is resonating again.
But isn't that an area where we may fall foul of the IRA? You know, those subsidies are available if you're in the US.
Yeah, but that's my point to them. I say, listen, you know, most of the packaging and testing is done in Canada. And if you agree with me that the basic premise of the IRA and the CHIPS Act is resiliency, I said it doesn't really make sense just to increase production in the United States for shipping all of that in Asia for being tested and packaged. It's much more smart, I would put it, to do that with an ally like Canada, where we could do the packaging and testing, and they can have a number of investment there. So we can benefit both and be more resilient, because that, for me, is the basic principle between the CHIPS Act and the IRA, is resiliency. If you just increase production somehow, but you need to ship everything back in Asia to be tested and packaged, you're not really addressing resiliency. So that's my message when I go in Washington. And honestly, John, I would not be talking about that if I didn't have a number of discussions. We'll see. You know, it's ambitious, not necessarily easy, but you don't expect me to just tackle what's easy. And when I said first that we would talk to Volkswagen, I can tell you some people were laughing at me. And now when we signed the MOU, and for the first time, I think a Canadian industry minister is invited to the board, a number of folks are looking back and say, you know what, maybe we should have believed you the first time. So let's see.
We're running low on time, but let me turn to innovation policy in this country.
Yes.
We spoke a year ago about, and you were very enthusiastic about CARPA, the Canadian Advanced Research Project. It's kind of moonshot research based on the US DARPA. And you called it a new chapter in innovation. It turns out it was a pretty short chapter because it was killed in the budget and it's been replaced by 2 other programs. Why was it kicked into touch? I mean, it was very specific. It was aimed at radical innovation rather than incremental innovation. We now seem to be getting back to a less ambitious style of innovation.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's about the book. Now you're talking about the chapter. Let me finish the book and then you can judge it. I'd say, you know, initially, you're quite right. I thought the CARPA model was interesting. And then we started looking at what would make more sense for Canada, you know, considering that the US has a much deeper bench to absorb that. We started going around. I met with the Finnish Innovation Agency, talked to the folks in Israel. I read about what's going on in Taiwan, what happened in South Korea. And it occurred that an innovation agency would probably be the first best step for us to really, you know, mind the gap, as people would say on the other side of the ocean, the 1 to 20 million support that we need to provide across industry. And I'll give you one of the best examples. You know, I come from rural Canada, and forestry is quite significant. But when you go in Finland, they just don't do softwood lumber to export, but they've kind of created new materials, for example, composite material that they use in aerospace. Well, that's the type of things that can we move higher up the value chain to create more growth in Canada. And I think the Innovation Agency would be willing and would be able to do that. So, you know, productivity, John, you wrote about that. This has been an issue in this country for as long as I remember reading. I'm 52. People have always said, how do you crack that nut of productivity? I think the Innovation Agency is kind of trying to do things differently. We can't repeat what we've done for generations. We need to look at that differently.
Well, let me just
sure.
interrupt there and suggest that we are still doing things the same way we've done them for for a very long time with the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Incentive Program, which spends billions of dollars essentially sprinkling it hither and thither to any number of companies, and it's designed to produce incremental innovation. The government said it's going to review that program. How are we doing with the review?
Well, we need to do better. It's pretty cumbersome. And the downside of that is that you don't know if you're going to get it, because it's only after an audit that you either qualify or not for the tax credit. So I think the Innovation Agency is addressing some of that, because this is an upfront grant to support you in doing innovation. But to your point, can we do better? Certainly. We're trying a number of things, but we do things differently a bit, John. I mean, we did pick winner. I mean, I look at our industrial strategy. When I said we're going to have mRNA capability in Canada, we landed Moderna. When I said we're going to be in the battery ecosystem, we landed some of the largest investment. When I say we're going to look at semiconductors, I don't think that we ever had as many discussions with semiconductor manufacturing companies around the world. When we put our minds to it, we win. Look at AI, look at quantum, look at cyber. I think, the fact that the German chancellor decided to go to an AI center in Montreal, and the Korean president stopped in to look at what we're doing in quantum in Toronto or in AI, it's just telling to me that what we're doing resonates. And so when we put our minds, we can win, but we need to be very proactive, because you'll like what I'm going to say, but not everyone in the world wakes up in the morning thinking about Canada. You do, I do, and our viewers do, but it's a big world out there. It's very competitive. You need to be on the front foot all the time. You need to make the case. That's what I'm doing every day. And I think that's what we need. We need a Team Canada approach to attract these investments, because that's what created the aerospace sector. You remember, we landed Pratt & Whitney, we landed Bell Helicopter, we landed at the time Bombardier and Airbus. And this is a thriving industry. I think that you and I, 10 years from now, we might be in different jobs, but we certainly, and we'll have a chat and say, I think the battery EV ecosystem in Canada that we're building will probably be as big as what we've seen in aluminum and steel decades ago in terms of economic output and jobs for Canadians.
Just to round up, you've had a grueling year. It's not over yet, but are you still having fun? I mean, you've been suggested as the future leader of the Liberal Party of Quebec. Would you be interested in politics closer to home?
Everyone is trying to find me a new job. I try to get that personal now. I thought I was doing an okay job in doing what I do now. We've been landing a number of things. Listen, I love what I do. I think these are generational opportunities. I don't think as a country we can afford to miss any of them. So that's why I'm putting everything. The flame is still there. You see, I'm still jet lagged from Japan, and I'm on my way to Belgium in 2 hours after this interview. So for a guy of 52 is not that bad, I would say. And the flame is there. The passion is there. And I think that for me, lending these generational opportunities for Canada, I think the 21st century is our moment for us to shine. I think we have everything that the world wants and needs, certainly our friends and allies around the world. So it's for us to make the case and be out there. And that's certainly what I'm doing with my colleagues. The Indo-Pacific strategy, you mentioned my colleague, the trade minister. This is really a team effort, and the prime minister. So listen, I love what I do, and I appreciate everyone trying to find me a new job, but I'd say not for now. I love it.
Okay, well, merci beaucoup, Minister. Have
Merci.
a great holiday.
What a pleasure. Next time, come with me on the trip. You'll see it for yourself.
Safe travels.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.